It was never supposed to be more than a quick research trip. The temple was buried deep within the hills of a forgotten village in northern India. No name on any map, just whispers among the elderly and half-burnt entries in an old journal I found tucked between pages of moldy scripture. I had been chasing ancient architecture and forbidden lore for years, but something about this one felt heavier. Still, I went. Curiosity always wins with people like me. The journey to the village was hellish. Miles of dirt roads, paths that vanished midway, and the occasional eerie silence that would blanket the air so suddenly it made my ears ring. The driver, who dropped me off, didn't wait. He muttered something in Hindi about the place being cursed and took off, his tires kicking up dust as he vanished down the winding trail. I stood there alone, bag slung over my shoulder, staring at the cracked stone arch that marked the beginning of the trail to the temple. The villagers wouldn't speak to me, not directly. Some watched from behind curtains. Others crossed themselves with shaking fingers when I passed. An old woman caught my eye and pressed something into my palm. An amulet carved from bone and stained with something dark. "Don't enter when the wind stands still," she whispered before turning and shuffling away. I still don't know exactly what she meant, but the way her voice trembled stuck with me. The temple revealed itself slowly, hidden by thick vines and gnarled roots. Its spire pierced the canopy like a dagger, the rest of it sunken and strangled by centuries of decay. Birds didn't sing here. No insects buzzed. It felt like time itself avoided this place. Inside, the air was thick, like walking into a room that hadn't breathed in 100 years. The main hall was still somewhat intact, stone pillars carved with intricate symbols that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. The statues were unlike any I'd seen before, humanoid, but with elongated limbs and empty oval-shaped eyes. Their hands were raised not in prayer, but in warning or surrender. I wasn't sure which. I set up my equipment and began taking notes. The walls bore writings I couldn't immediately recognize. Some dialect of Sanskrit maybe, or something older, something that predated written language itself. As I examined the carvings, a low hum began to vibrate through the stone beneath my feet. I froze. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't wind. It was a voice. No, voices, layered and unintelligible, like dozens of whispers trying to speak through a wall. I spun around. No one. Just the statues and the silence that now seemed to pulse with every beat of my heart. I shook it off. Maybe it was echo. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me after the exhausting journey. But then, it happened again. This time, closer. I leaned in toward one of the walls, placing my hand on the stone. It was warm, not sun-warmed, but like body heat. And just beneath the surface, the whispering continued. Clearer now, but still in a tongue I couldn't recognize. The words scratched at the edge of my understanding, tugging at something primal inside me. A chill spread up my spine. I backed away, nearly tripping over a fallen urn. As I steadied myself, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Behind the central statue, at the far end of the hall, a crack in the wall, just wide enough to squeeze through. The edges of the stone were jagged, torn, like something had burst from within. I approached cautiously. The statue in front of it was larger than the others, its face worn smooth with time or by design. Unlike the others, this one had both hands covering its mouth, as if trying to stifle a scream or a secret. The whispers grew louder the closer I came to the crack, still unintelligible, but insistent, urging, pleading. The air was different here. Heavier, yes, but also expectant, like the moment before a lightning strike. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it into the darkness behind the crack. Only more stone, but there was something etched on the inner wall. A symbol I had seen before in the old journal. A circle with jagged lines radiating out like teeth. Beneath it, a single phrase, this time in crude English. Do not listen. I stepped back, breath hitching. The voice in my head. It was mine. It was whispering now inside me, mimicking my thoughts, repeating them with just enough delay to make me question whether I had thought them at all. It said my name. Not aloud, but from somewhere below, as if the temple itself had memorized me. I should have left then, packed up, hiked down, never returned, but I didn't. I couldn't. Something was holding me there. Not physically, not yet, but my legs refused to move, and the curiosity, that damned need to know, rooted me to the ground. I turned off my flashlight and stood in the pitch black, letting the whispers roll over me like waves. And then the wind outside stopped. Completely, just like the old woman said. The silence after the wind died was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not the peaceful kind of silence you find in a library or a snowy forest. This was suffocating. It pressed in from all sides, making my ears ring and my thoughts scatter. My breath sounded like thunder inside my skull. The whispering had stopped, but that almost made it worse. Like something had paused to listen back. I didn't plan on exploring the crack behind the statue that night, but I couldn't stop staring at it. The phrase on the wall, "Do not listen," looped in my mind like a mantra. Yet I kept wondering who wrote it and why. Who were they warning? And from what? The next morning, I returned to the crack with a crowbar and my flashlight. Sunlight barely touched the inner walls of the temple, but that narrow fissure behind the statue led into total blackness. As I dug into the weakened stone edges, flakes and dust fell away, revealing more of the strange symbol beneath. Every strike echoed like it was traveling through miles of hidden halls beneath me. Finally, the opening widened enough for me to squeeze through. The space was tight, the air thick and stale. My flashlight flickered twice before stabilizing, casting jittery beams across the stone tunnel ahead. It wasn't natural. This passage had been carved intentionally, but crudely, as though whoever made it didn't want to be followed. The walls narrowed and expanded randomly, like a throat swallowing its breath. After maybe 10 or 15 feet, the tunnel ended in a small chamber. And there, I saw it. A room, forgotten, sealed, untouched by time. It was circular, its walls covered in carvings more frantic than those in the main temple. Unlike the graceful, symbolic etchings outside, these were chaotic. Scratch marks, spirals, human faces distorted with fear or rage. A large stone slab rested in the center of the room, like an altar, its surface stained dark, as if something had soaked deep into the pores over centuries. What disturbed me most was that the walls looked as though people had tried to claw their way out. My pulse quickened. I moved slowly around the room, documenting the carvings. The air was strangely warm, and I could hear something faint, a rhythmic sound, like distant breathing. I told myself it was my own, echoing off the stone, but deep down, I wasn't convinced. In one corner of the room, half buried beneath fallen debris, I found a wooden box wrapped in fabric that had long since rotted away. It was sealed with a cord made of what looked like human hair, brittle, gray, knotted tightly. Against my better judgment, I cut it open. Inside were items that didn't belong in a temple. A silver hand mirror, cracked down the center. A bundle of dried herbs. A necklace made of finger bones. And a folded piece of leather parchment. I unrolled it carefully. The writing was jagged and erratic, switching between ancient script and broken English. It spoke of a room that remembers, a mouth that feeds on voices, and a curse that binds the soul in stone. At the bottom was a smeared handprint, 3 fingers, elongated unnaturally. Suddenly, the walls groaned. A low creaking sound echoed from the passage behind me, and I spun around just in time to see the narrow tunnel shift. Not cave in shift, as though the temple itself were moving its organs. My exit was narrowing. Panic surged. I shoved the artifacts back into my bag and scrambled through the shrinking gap. Stone scraped against my shoulders as I forced my way out, the edges biting into my skin. I stumbled back into the main hall, gasping. The statue with the covered mouth seemed different now. Closer. Its hands pressed tighter against its face. Stone fingers digging into its cheeks like it was trying to stop itself from screaming. I backed away and looked around. The light filtering through the cracked ceiling had shifted unnaturally. Though only minutes had passed, the sky above was twilight dark. That's when I realized I wasn't alone anymore. There was something moving at the far end of the hall. Too slow to be a person. Too fluid to be an animal. I froze, watching as the shadows shifted in ways that defied light. I heard the whisper again, but this time it wasn't in the walls. It was inside me, curling around my spine. It asked me a question. I don't know how to explain that. There were no words, just a sensation, like the feeling of someone staring directly into your memories. The question wasn't spoken. It was impressed onto my mind. Do you remember me? And I did. I don't know how. I didn't recognize the room, the temple, the artifacts, but something ancient inside me responded with fear, like a child remembering the shape of a nightmare. I ran, out of the temple, into the overgrowth, through the trees. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the village, where the old woman stood silently, as if she'd been waiting. She didn't speak this time, just looked at me, then at the amulet still clutched in my trembling hand. It was warm, warmer than before. Something had followed me out. The next few days blurred into a haze of insomnia and confusion. I couldn't sleep, not properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I found myself back inside the forgotten room, standing before the stone altar, my hands soaked in something thick and warm. In the dreams, the carvings moved. The twisted faces in the walls screamed silently, mouths stretched wider each night. But the most terrifying part wasn't what I saw. It was what I felt. Something old, something conscious, and it had recognized me. Even in waking hours, the air around me felt wrong. I'd sit at the edge of the forest, watching the tree line, convinced something was watching back. The birds no longer came near the temple ruins. Insects went quiet when I passed. And at night, the whispering returned, this time in my room. It came from the corners, from behind mirrors, from beneath the floorboards. Always the same voice, soft but relentless. You opened it. You remembered. I tried to talk to the villagers, but most avoided me now. The children ran when they saw me. The old woman with the milky eyes wouldn't answer my questions. She just kept repeating a phrase in her language that I didn't understand. Until one evening, under the low orange glow of the sunset, she took my hand and said in broken English, "You carry the voice now. You let it in." "What voice?" I demanded. She only shook her head and whispered, "The mouth beneath the stone. The one that was buried to forget." I didn't understand fully, but I knew she was right. Ever since I unsealed that room, something had changed in me. I could hear things I shouldn't, conversations of people too far to hear, murmurs from empty rooms, and sometimes I'd catch my own voice speaking when I hadn't opened my mouth. Echoes of thoughts I'd never had. I decided to go back, to end whatever this was. Maybe I was cursed. Maybe I was losing my mind. But I knew that room held the answer. The second descent into the temple was different. The forest path felt darker, heavier. The air was thicker, and the birds had vanished entirely. When I entered the ruins, the main hall was colder than before, though the sun still shone outside. And the statue, that terrible statue, was weeping, not metaphorically. Real dark streaks trailed from its covered eyes, dripping slowly down its stone face. I didn't stop. I moved toward the crack behind it, which had widened since my last visit, as if the temple wanted me back inside. I crawled into the passage again, flashlight flickering. The walls pulsed faintly now, like they were breathing. When I reached the circular room, it looked cleaner. The debris had cleared, the markings on the walls sharper, more defined. The altar in the center glistened as though freshly wet. I should have turned back. Instead, I stepped closer. I laid my hand on the cold slab, and the whispers exploded. Dozens of voices poured into my head at once. Some screamed, others cried. Some laughed in a way that made my skin crawl. I collapsed to my knees, clutching my skull, as the room throbbed with a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I could see flashes. People being dragged into the chamber, bound in silence, the walls absorbing their screams, the mirror, the herbs, the bone necklace. These were not artifacts. They were offerings, or tools. Each held a piece of the ritual. And then the altar cracked. A deep gaping line split down the center, and something black seeped out. It wasn't liquid, not entirely. It moved like smoke, but held shape like flesh. It rose slowly into a form that was almost human. Limbs too long, head too wide, its face featureless except for a vertical slit where the mouth should be. That mouth began to open, wide, widening beyond natural limits, and from it came a sound. No, a memory. My own voice, my scream, from my dream. It had been feeding on me, growing. I stumbled back, my flashlight shattering against the wall. The only light now came from the slit in its face, pale, pulsing like a heartbeat. The thing stepped off the altar and crawled toward me in impossible silence. No footsteps, no breath. "You woke me," it said, though its mouth never moved. The words bled into my thoughts, not through sound, but sensation. "You remembered, and so I return." I turned to flee, but the passage had closed behind me. Stone, seamless. The room was sealing me in, just as it had with others before me. But something strange happened then. The amulet. It had been dead weight in my pocket since the night I ran. Now, it burned. A white heat. I pulled it free, and for a moment, the creature recoiled. It shrieked, not through sound, but through pressure. The chamber shook violently. The walls began to crack. The amulet's stone glowed, and symbols appeared in the air around me. Familiar symbols. The ones I saw etched into the village stones. They rotated, clicked into place like puzzle pieces. Instinct took over. I held the amulet high and stepped toward the altar. The whispers screamed in agony, but the light pushed them back. The creature twisted, distorted, like smoke caught in a vortex. I don't remember the exact moment it vanished, only the sudden suffocating silence afterward. The chamber went still, the altar crumbled, and the wall behind me cracked open, revealing the tunnel once more. I crawled out, the amulet pulsing faintly, the whispering now reduced to static. But I knew this wasn't over. The curse hadn't been destroyed. It had simply awakened.